Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So today we're going to talk about dominoes falling, because after that last video about the unusually honest question, whole bunch of new questions came in. Some were just normal excuse making. Some were people like, "Hey, I want a list of these dominoes. This would be really useful in conversation." And some people who, in good faith, don't see them. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over the dominoes that would fall. And we're going to start with ones that I think are relatively easy to see. And as soon as they're said, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, I guess so. And then we're going to go to some that are a little bit more complex. And then we're going to go to one that just shows you how widespread it is. So we're going to talk about the dominoes that would fall if we could end systemic racism in this country, and how those dominoes that fall would help white people. Okay, why don't we have good social safety nets in this country? Start there. Welfare queen, right? That's how they motivate people to vote against it. What color is she? They appeal to that racism, right? Or they talk about immigrants coming over to get welfare, so they don't want to fund it, right? If they get welfare, what are they going to do? Get rims and iPhones, right? The main push, the main tool that conservatives use to stop social safety nets from developing in this country is an appeal to racism. You get rid of that, those social safety nets show up. That one seems pretty obvious. Why are your wages so low? And if you work for tips, yeah, you definitely want to look into this. Tipping is a legacy of slavery. White business owners didn't want black people to make good pay, so they got an exemption. They were tipped employees. And you can Google this. This has been fact-checked by everybody from Pick Your Outlet to USA Today. Tipping existed beforehand, but it became widespread, and it became very important as a tool to suppress black wages. And then, well, it spread. What about housing? I know, it's another social safety net. Why don't people want to invest in affordable housing? Why do people object when subsidized housing gets put in near them? Because of the image of the projects, right? Racism. Playing off of that motivates voters, not in my backyard type of voters. Makes it harder. Militarized police. Why'd that come about? The war on drugs. Who was that aimed at? Right? Why don't you have good schools in this country? Because they try to keep that disparity. Those neighborhoods don't need as much funding. Those neighborhoods don't perform as well, so we're going to give them less funding, making them perform worse so we can justify giving them less funding later, right? See, the problem is that school that gets the less funding from that neighborhood, right? And it's not a white neighborhood, is it? But that level of funding, that becomes the baseline. So everybody else's funding gets depressed as well. They use it as a tool. They use racism as a tool to get white voters to vote against their own interests. As long as they're doing better than those other people, well, they'll keep voting that way, even though it hurts them. Those seem to me like they would be easier to see once they were just pointed out. But here's some a little bit more complex. Why do you take your shoes off at the airport? Well, for security. No, not really. I mean, it's theater. It's security theater. That's not a big deal. But how did it start? Why did it make people feel safer? How did you end up losing that freedom at the airport to keep your shoes on. An attempt, right? An attempt. But it's because the person that attempted it, because that group of people, well, they'd been othered. They were pushed out. The racism came into play, and it was okay because it was going to catch them. Right? It's not actually about stopping mass incidents. I would imagine that if that was the case, we probably have a whole lot stricter gun laws. But it's not. Your sons and daughters, your friends, why are they constantly being shipped off to the global south to go and fight in wars? Because systemic racism exists. Those countries, well, they're not run by white people, are they? They need somebody to tell them what to do. They need somebody to run their country. It's a root of imperialism. Knocking down systemic racism opens the door to make the country better in so many ways. We should want to get rid of systemic racism because, well, it's racist. I mean, just the general good that would do. That's the reason to do it. However, for a lot of white people, they need that self-interest. And there it is. Why don't you have public pools? Do a little bit of research on that. When they started desegregating pools, a lot of places just closed them up. They weren't as popular anymore. Used to be a really big thing. Not so much anymore. It's so pervasive in this country that even something as simple as pools doesn't escape its grasp. It's everywhere. If racism can factor into whether or not your community has a public pool, it probably factors into a lot of stuff you don't really think about. There are a bunch of dominoes, but the first one that has to go to get to any of this is systemic racism. We've got to move past that in this country. That's the first step. Once that domino gets knocked down, all of this other stuff is going with it. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.